Happy New Year. Good morning and welcome speakers and audience members.
Happy New Year. Good morning and welcome speakers and audience members to the very first webinar in 2021 in the All Energy Decarbonise ongoing series, and the 27th we've held since last May, when holding a physical event was obviously impossible. We look forward to a degree of normality later this year and have announced our August dates for the live 20th of the series event at Glasgow's SEC just weeks before the UN's COP26 is held there. In the meantime, webinars win the day. I'm Judith Patton, Project Director of our duo of events and the co-creator of All Energy way back at the start of the century. Today, over 230 of us meet for harnessing the power of data, accelerating to net zero. Thanks both to sponsorship and organisation of a superb speaker lineup by UK Research and Innovation. UKRI's Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme is pioneering the data-enabled systems approach to unlock the benefits of smart local energy systems. Big thanks, UKRI. It's time for some housekeeping points. Whilst I talk briefly, my slide will help you get the greatest benefit possible during your time with us this morning and afterwards. Not only will you see URLs for where to find this webinar to watch again and all the others we've held, watched over 17,000 times in total, but also where to track down speaker presentations. It's important that if you'd like to ask questions or rate this webinar, you shrink your screen from full screen to be able to see where to do these things. The webinar will be available on demand not long after transmission, so spread the word to your colleagues. The biographical details of all of today's speakers are online on the registration page. Get back to that if you need to top up your knowledge on them. Now to today's topic. Data, a crucial factor in making our future integrated energy systems work. The webinar brings together government, energy disruptors and regulators to discuss the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead, and is chaired by the perfect person to do so, Laura Sands, CBE. Laura's a non-executive director of SGN and the Energy Systems Catapult and has many more fingers in many more pies. Her recently launched Recosting Energy, Powering for the Future final report is truly inspirational. Importantly, she was chair of the government's Energy Data Task Force, so can rightly be described as the doyenne of energy data. Without more ado, I'd like to wish all of you here today and your families good health in these challenging times. Stay safe. Now I'll pass over to Laura and her stellar cast of speakers for what I know will be a thought-provoking 90 minutes. Enjoy.
Laura, you're muted. Laura, your best words just
Muted. Laura, you're muted. Laura, your best words just disappeared. You're muted.
Right.
Hooray!
All right. Are we there with the screen? No. So much for being the being able to organize these things properly. Hello, I'm Laura Sands, and I wanted to say a massive thank you to All Energy, to Judith and the team. It's wonderful to be here, even if it is only virtually. But it is a great lineup, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of context to where many of the speakers are going to take us, which is really moving from the brawn in the industry to the brain. And I think it's an exciting moment of new discovery. I wanted to just give us a little context of where we are. Policymakers are more or less sitting in the middle here, although I think they're shifting much more to the future than to the past. But we have gone from a very much a sort of very centralized system to much more of a decentralized system with lots more players, and I can't do anything without ensuring that we have Monty Python there. Just to give some context to this, we are going from probably about 400 key players in the sector. Most people know each other's golf handicap, to about 50 million actions and assets. If you think of EV cars, they will be able to do two things, both release energy and consume energy. And 50 million assets and actions all happening within the system itself. Then you add heat pumps, you add all sorts of other applications. It is not going to be able to be done in the analog world that we've been living in. So if you look at the quantity and intensity of actions, the diversity of these assets, i.e. with different characteristics, their interaction and that cumulative impact, and also having to work with new actors. Hopefully we're going to be able to really turbocharge the local energy plans, and that starts to create new interactions. This, as I say, is not able to be done in the analog fashion we've done today. And it creates huge opportunities, optimization, huge amount of value that's sitting across the system, which has never really been properly released, and digitalization will be able to do that. A dividend to customers, and also better investment decisions will be able to be made through opening up data and digitalization. Now, some of you know about the Energy Data Task Force, and there are people on this call, not least Dinka, who's really been driving this forward. And we've made some excellent progress. Since the publication, Ofgem have really driven forward on digitalization on networks. The concept of presumed open has been very much accepted and embedded in regulation. We're moving fast on the data catalogue that the ONS is driving, and the Energy Networks Association is driving forward on the digital system map. So it's an exciting time right across the sector. But the real prize is not really the data, because the data is the feedstock. It's really digitalization. And let's just look at this. This is a vision that we have for a modern digitalized infrastructure, where data visibility is really the data task force, and that is the data openness. But what does this offer us? It offers us open data tools and system platforms to look at that infrastructure and give us asset visibility and cumulative asset visibility. We're then going to need digitalization software, AI and algorithms to actually optimize the operations of these 50 million assets and actions. And we're going to need very dynamic digital markets. Talking about regulation on the right side, actually regulation is going to have to change fundamentally, because it's going to need to be very much data and digitally driven. It is not going to be able to process regulate as it does today. So digitalization is not an enabler, but it must be transformative. Sorry about this. So going back, we end up with a lot of digital essentials. We're going to need system stability, digital infrastructure, asset identity and connectivity, and interoperability. Interoperability being absolutely crucial. And hopefully this will deliver some transformative business models. But digitalization doesn't come without risks, and we've got massive risks and governance requirements on data security, that interoperability. Algorithms, anybody in the education world, well, we've all known about algorithms recently, and their design and outcomes. There's going to be a much greater focus on consumer data and detriment. So we do need to move forward, and many people on this call are really taking this agenda forward. So it's an exciting time, as I said, but we are going to need standards and rules. And there's been some very good examples when it comes to how the mobile sector in particular has set standards that have created this interoperability. So watch this space. There's lots of plans out there, and I'm sure that many people, as the panel, will start to highlight what there is. We are moving from data to digitalization. We need to transform. This will reduce costs, but we need to deliver services that delight consumers. So I look forward to everyone else's contributions today, and not least the audience's questions for us all. So thank you very much indeed. And I am very, very pleased, having given you a little bit of context, to introduce you to Dinka. Dinka is head of data policy at BEIS and has been absolutely instrumental in driving forward the data task force throughout its process, but now actually much more importantly in its implementation. So may I hand over to Dinka? Thank you.
Brilliant. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. Yeah, so like Laura said, for the last 18 months, I've been working in the smart energy team at BEIS and sort of working very closely with Laura and some of the other panelists here on implementing what the vision described by the Energy Data Task Force, and also taking a more holistic policy view on digitalization in the energy sector. Can I just check with Joshua? Yeah, cool. So my slides are here. I'm going to talk about sort of a policy perspective on this whole thing, and I think it will build a lot on what Laura just described. So hopefully this will all make sense. I don't think I can move the slides. Are they moving now? Can someone confirm that? I'll assume that the slides are moving. If they're not, just let me know. But anyway, so I think as a policy team, we've been focusing on fundamentally the why, the how, and the what of energy system digitalization. I think Laura set up the why really well, and hopefully I don't need to convince any of the audience here that digitalization is essential. I think there is some confusion around how we go about doing it and what exactly do we need to do. So just to make that point, I think in a net zero context, digitalization is no longer optional. It's not a nice to have. It's not something that would be good. It is absolutely fundamental. And the energy system itself, a bit like how Laura said, we are moving from roughly 400 actors to 50 million potentially. It's a fundamental change and it's transformative. It's not about making small improvements or doing one innovation project. It has to be a sector-wide change program, and that is never easy. So it is quite essential. But how do we go about doing that? And I think from a government's perspective, I think we need to do a few very essential strategic things. We need to remove the barriers that might exist towards digitalization. And I think the task force did a great job of highlighting some of those barriers and giving clear recommendations for how we could go about removing them. I think we also need to be very clear about who our users are and how we are serving their user needs. And I think that has to be a key focus of anything we do. It has to be our prioritization tool. And we also need to ensure that the foundations are strong, because the world will change in the future. You know, EV uptake, heat pump uptake, all these sorts of things will happen, and we can't predict the pace of change. So I think we need to build the right foundations so that if we are required to pivot or if we are required to reprioritize, we can do all of that confidently. So creating those foundations are important. But then we also need to be clear about what we are doing, because it's all well and good to talk theoretically, but unless we can point to specific activities and monitor and evaluate them, whether they are leading us towards the outcomes that we care about, it will lose momentum. And I think therefore a focus on specific activities with timelines, milestones, all that sort of thing is really important. And the work that my team are doing in BEIS with colleagues in Ofgem and Innovate UK and even industry, I think is trying to make that case very cogently in terms of, okay, this is everything that we are going to do. This is how it is leading us to the outcomes that we care about. So what is the underlying theory of change? So I believe that if we coordinate all the relevant activity that is ongoing, if we invest in building the digital infrastructure that is required, and if we set the rules and the associated guidance for industry, if we do all these things properly, I believe that it will create the required leadership and it will remove the barriers that are stopping industry from making the progress that it wants to make. So once that happens, ultimate outcome is that we believe that we'll have a effectively digitalized energy system which can cope with the future that Laura just described in her opening remarks, where it's a future where we are delighting customers, it's a future where we are integrating net zero capable technologies effectively, and essentially we are averting the climate disaster while being fair and just in the transition. So, essentially that is the theory of change. But I also recognize that many in the audience will probably ask these questions, which are, but how will you do all of this? I want to see tangible action. Like, what is your plan? And how exactly will we know that what you promised is actually being delivered? So where is that happening? And then finally, some of you might even question whether this is the area we should focus on. Aren't there more important things to be concerned with? Why do we care about digitalization so much? Shouldn't we focus our energies elsewhere? So my hope is that in the policy statements that BEIS will make in due course, we'll be able to answer exactly these questions comprehensively and hopefully to the satisfaction of our stakeholders. But it's important to also look at the journey so far, and I'll end with the journey that is in front of us. So for those who don't know, this all started in 2017 with the Smart System and Flexibility Plan, which is a key policy document looking at how we integrate smart and flexible technologies into our energy system. There was an update to the plan in 2018, and in that update, we promised the setting up of this Energy Data Task Force, which Laura very kindly chaired and worked with Energy Systems Catapult to do all the work that they did. The task force came up with 5 recommendations, and that was in summer of 2019, so it's been a while. But ever since then, myself, my team, colleagues in Ofgem and Innovate have come together to form this group that we call Modernizing Energy Data, and it's more of an implementation group which is looking at delivering on that vision described by the task force. However, so we are very excited by all the developments that have happened, all the progress that has happened, but we believe there is more to do. And we also believe that there is a lot of activity which is not always most coordinated. So I think that there is definitely a need to provide that coordination. And Laura mentioned this already, so I won't repeat her what she said. But the point I'm making is that there is a lot of progress against those 5 headline recommendations. And more detail, I'd be happy to provide you more detail in questions. But equally, you can access the link on my slides to go to the gov.uk page where all of this is mentioned. But I want to leave you with sort of the journey ahead. So we are in where we are. Like I said, lots of progress, but we are still remaining with issues and deficiencies. And we want to get to a desired state. But there are barriers in the way. And we can argue about the semantics, but essentially, I believe that the barriers are poor visibility of energy data, lack of leadership and coordination, lack of clear incentives, poor understanding of the value case of the use cases. And obviously, there's the burden of the legacy systems and underinvestment in the required digital infrastructure. So all of these barriers are in the way of us getting to the desired state that we care about. And we can find different ways of describing them, but this is the general issue. And I believe that the strategy that we are developing, which is about being that place that provides coordination, investing where digital infrastructure is underinvested because of lack of, or high risk. So Innovate UK is de-risking that investment. And Ofgem are working to develop the right rules and frameworks that will give industry the confidence to make the investments and make the changes that we are asking them to do. So I believe that the energy data and digitalization strategy, which we have promised to publish in the energy white paper, we believe that it will show us a credible plan of how we're going to remove these barriers and move towards the outcomes that we all desire with digitalization. So I'll leave you with that. These slides will be available so you can access those links. But this is what I wanted to sort of set out, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have for me. That's all I had to say. Back to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinka. And I have to say that your presentation, and now we have Ofgem's presentation, has been a real reflection of government and the regulator working not just extremely well together, but actually at quite a lot of speed in comparison to maybe some people's experience in the energy sector previously. So I just want to say congratulations and thank you. I'm really thrilled to introduce Elena, who is Senior Program Manager, Data and Digital Insights at Ofgem. And as I said, Ofgem has moved very fast on, in many ways, implementing the Energy Data Task Force. And if one starts to look at some of the Rio requirements, it's been really substantive. So, Elena, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us at this webinar. It's really exciting to talk to everybody about what we're doing at Ofgem, and I am trying to see if my slides are visible at the moment. Apologies, it will take a bit of time, and just making sure that they're all right. If anybody can let me know. Oh yes, I can see them also on the screen, so brilliant. So moving on to what Laura was actually saying, and Dinka was saying a lot about how challenging the future of the energy sector looks like. I've got this illustration here of what the future of infrastructure looks like. I'm not sure, oh, the slide hasn't gone through, apologies. So looking at the energy sector today versus the energy sector tomorrow, I think, Laura, you mentioned the industry is moving from 400 to 50 million actions or assets that are talking together. And if you look at it, this is not just where end consumers are. We have the energy industry changing in all areas, moving from a centralized to a decentralized market, generation, transmission, distribution, ability to measure at every single point of either usage or transmission. And then the end consumers are also a lot more diverse, whereas previously we tended to think of domestic and non-domestic consumers. At the moment, we've got various different units that consume energy in various different ways, and they're, Laura, as you mentioned, not just consumers but also producers of energy in the case of, for example, electric vehicles, which is very topical. And data and digitalization is an absolute must for all of those interactions to be able to be done in day to day and very quickly. So if you think about every single data point, every single interaction, every single touch point, if you have 50 million assets, if we take this into account, they have to interact all the time together. And there are millions and millions of touch points, building to a cumulative trillions and trillions of decision points that have to be taken at very high speed. That is inconceivable to be done in a manual way. Data digitalization is an absolute must to deal with this complexity, interconnectedness, and dynamic that will exist, and to a degree is already existing in the energy sector. And why is this important? It's not that if we don't have data and digitalization, all of a sudden tomorrow we're not going to have energy. We will. Integration already exists in the energy market because electricity is already integrated. The electrons we use to power our computers are the same electrons that, you know, flow in all parts of the world. But what we do need to know is we need to know that the decisions, every single one of those trillions of decisions, is actually made in the most optimized way. And looking at that, it's quite a challenge, because you not only have to make a decision about what's the right thing to do now at this very moment, tactically in the day-to-day, just so that a flow of energy from generation through the market, through transmissions, with multiple participants in a very complex setup, but also taking a step back, looking at all of that data and actually thinking strategically, what are the optimum investments in industry, in infrastructure, in new assets, in new processes, in new business opportunities. So there needs to be also a way to make sense of all of that data, of all of those processes, of how they interconnect with each other, what are the dependencies. And where we are at Ofgem looking at this is we do not believe that we've got it all. We don't know everything about how to make sure that this functions effectively. We believe that the market is also very good at deciding how those things are, how those challenges are best solved. So one of the main things that we're trying to focus right now is to have effective regulation. And by that, what I mean is having the right building blocks, or aiming to put the right building blocks in place to enable the market to function most effectively, so that all market participants can come up with the right ways to ensure interoperability, which is absolutely crucial to enable this system to function properly. And moving on and thinking about this, we have reviewed our objectives in light of coronavirus and in light of the situation that is going on in the world at the moment. And we've iterated many a times that our objectives remain the same. As Dinker said, net zero is not optional. However, we also believe that ensuring that there is enough competition and innovation in the energy market is absolutely crucial. We also need to make sure that we bring everybody along on this journey, because we have to protect consumers. We had a little bit of a chat in our pre-meeting about how there are a lot of vulnerable people around, and we also need to make sure that they are taken with us along on this journey. But looking also at, again, what Dinker said previously about what is it, how BEIS are working and the government is working. And one of the things he mentioned is very much serving the user needs. What we believe will happen in the future is that it will be users who will drive the demand for innovation and the demand for better services, the demand for better functioning markets. And those will naturally drive innovation in data and digitalization. Where this is not sufficiently demand-driven, this is where we believe market intervention is necessary. Obviously, we do not have a crystal ball about that. We need to listen to the market, listen to users, learn from everybody, and then adapt our regulation in order to lead the market effectively in this area. Another thing to take into consideration is the energy sector is not the only one going through such fragmentation, decentralization, and increase in complexity. And one of the things that we need to also be mindful looking into the future is that this increased complexity will hit other, if you must, traditional economic sectors. So the interdependencies, if there are 50 million participants in the energy market in the UK, what about other sectors? And then if you sort of layer them on top of each other, you will have, and we believe the expectation is that there will be a lot of opportunities for interconnectedness between various different sectors. I mean, there are obvious collaboration opportunities, for example, with transport, EVs being a prime example, telecommunications, where, for example, smart meters cannot function without a good network so that they can communicate. You look at construction and the quality of buildings and smart buildings and self-sustainable buildings, and I can go on and on with examples. So what are we doing about it? What is it that is happening right now? Laura and Dinker already mentioned the Energy Data Task Force report and the Modernizing Energy Data Program. The report sort of creating the vision and our joint program delivering this vision in a coordinated way between government and regulator and in partnership with the sector. We do believe genuinely in this partnership, and that is the right way to deliver this transformation that is absolutely vital to enable the sector to function properly. And we at Ofgem, and this is something Laura mentioned about the regulator itself needs to be fit for purpose. I won't dwell too much on this, but I just wanted to say is that we at Ofgem have recognized that we need to get better at this. So there has been a strategic priority now for data and digitalization at Ofgem, and that is both inward-looking and outward-looking. So we have also appointed a new chief data officer, and we're improving our own data capabilities so that we can be a more effective regulator by enabling better data standards and better use of data. And giving you an example, and I'll end on this, just a couple of examples of our approach to regulation and specifics about what we want the energy sector to do. We have started as part of Rio to obligate the network companies. So if you think about the structure of the market, this is a segment of the market, and compel them to comply with data best practice guidance and our guidance on digitalization strategy and action plans. I have to say that these guidances are a new approach, a more agile approach to policy developments. We've developed them in collaboration with industry and with experts. We've had Energy Systems Catapult collaborate with us on creating the data best practice guidance. We've iterated with the network companies the content of our digitalization strategy and action plan guidance in through agile fashion. We've worked with our users, and they've already published a second iteration of their digitalization strategies just last month. And just to iterate that we are working with the market, and we believe that the market is capable, with the right guidance, to come up with the best ways to achieve interoperability. Our guidance is based on principles, and we expect incremental and continuous service improvements. For example, we have not mandated specific standards for interoperability, but we've mandated that companies should work together to achieve interoperability in the best and most optimal way for the industry. Prime example is the collaboration we've got with the Energy Network Association on this. And I have to say, we hope this is the right approach. We hope this is the best way to achieve net zero, to achieve collaboration, to achieve data use, data visibility, data interoperability in the right way to enable the transformative innovation. And
Elena,
just to add as a final thing is, please tell us if we've got it right or not. We would definitely like to listen. And with that, I would like to finish, and back to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Elena, and very, very interesting and important what Ofgem is driving forward. I think your issues about consumers are really important, but also about conflation with other infrastructures. Now, I could call this the triumphant, which is BEIS, Ofgem, and now moving to Matt Hastings, who's really a leader in innovation. It's excellent to be joined by you from your beautiful place in Cornwall. And you head innovation at UKRI for prospering from the energy revolution, and has been a real steering and driving force behind data and digitalization. Matt.
Thank you, Laura. Let me just bring this up. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. As Laura said, I head up the innovation team on the Prospering from the Energy Revolution Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. What that means in practice is we have a program just over 100 million spent across really the development of integrated smart local energy systems, which is really trying to pull together heat, power and mobility in a smart way, which is benefit to consumers. So how we deployed that money, we have a range of different demonstrators, one in Scotland and 2 in Oxfordshire. Lots of EVs, lots of batteries, lots of renewables, lots of data challenges, all trying to be sort of integrated efficiently and effectively. We've got about 10 detailed designs projects, and you're going to hear from a couple of the members of those teams after me. And I think I will go quite quickly because I think the rubber really hits the road where we start to hear about these guys who are sort of doing advanced data science in practice. We've got £4 million being spent on key technology projects. There's about 17 of those, everything from 5th-generation heat networks to smart markets, etc. And a big research consortium called Energy Rev with about 33 academics on, and a fantastic local energy toolkit being developed by the Energy Systems Catapult. But in the bottom right hand corner there, that £3.9 million, you know, that's the money that we are spending on data. And data is absolutely central part of local energy, and as everyone has said, you know, that's the key enabler for us kind of moving forward to enable a digitized energy system. So this just explains PFER, Prospering from the Energy Revolution, 140 organizations funded across about 40 different projects. You won't be able to read any of those logos, but it just illustrates the amount of activity which is kind of going on. And this is our sort of 6-point plan in terms of what we've been involved in. So the task force we've already spoken about, modernising energy data access. I know a lot of people on the call have been involved in this competition. This is really our effort to try and make data available and accessible across the entirety of the energy sector. So we know that there is probably 600 different data sets across suppliers and other actors within the energy sector that could be made more open and available to enable the sector to deliver more interesting and valuable sort of business models. We started on that journey with sort of discovery phase involving 3 organizations with Electron and Siemens and Icebreaker One. We then moved on to an alpha phase, which was with Siemens and Icebreaker. And then the winner of the beta phase, so just moving into that phase now, is Icebreaker One. And what Icebreaker really building is a kind of governance platform to enable organizations to share and to utilize data efficiently and effectively in a fair way. So if you're not familiar with the Icebreaker One project, Open Energy, please do get involved, and they will be speaking on the 4th of February at the next 6 in 60 event. A quick Google of that, you will be able to register for that. Other things that we've done, the data best practice guidance with Ofgem. Really pleased that has now been sort of brought into the fold and is now being sort of used to help sort of steer best practice guidance, and thanks to Richard and the team at the Catapult for developing that. We've done some stuff with Regen Southwest around sort of user needs. I think there's a key priority around that, and there's more to do there, but this was really around local authorities. The link is on the screen there. And we've got a new competition which is just about to get to the award phase at the moment, called Modernising Energy Data Applications. And that's really there to sort of stimulate the market. If our data access competition was there to provide availability, you know, the applications competition there is really about utilization and new business models, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more shortly. But one thing hot off the press that some of you might know about and others might not is, off the back of the Energy Data Task Force, we are just about to launch a new energy system digitalization task force. And really the purpose of this digitalization task force is to envisage, you know, the full digital infrastructure and governance requirements of a modern energy system. This takes us from data as an enabler to digitalization as a new way of working in its entirety. So that's going to be super exciting and will be available in the not too distant future. You will hear a lot more. So our vision, and this is the final slide from me before I hand back to Laura. Our vision really consists of starting in energy to make data available and accessible. But like Ellie was saying, you know, this is a whole system problem. So we need the same sort of rules and standards across all sectors, which are sort of interoperable and ultimately have interdependency. So whether that's transport, mobility, buildings, weather, geospatial data, finance data, all of this stuff needs to come in together to enable sort of these three primary benefits. And for us, this is about informed and agile regulation. You know, we need a much faster cycle between innovation and regulatory change, and we can only do that with data. And that's not just Ofgem's problem. You know, we need to lean on Ofwat, the Office of Road and Rail, you know, Information Commissioner's Office, as well as people like the FSA and others. So it's a whole regulation challenge. But then also on this sort of more informed and agile policy side of things, you know, I think if we are being really critical, we need more sort of data science capability within government and within regulation and within all of these sort of associated institutions, including UKRI and Innovate UK, to really digitize the end-to-end processes to enable us to ultimately lead to this central benefit, which is really around consumer, business and societal benefits. You know, that's really where we're heading with all of this data activity, is to provide consumers and society with valuable business models that they can actually use for the benefit of their households and for their businesses and their society kind of moving forward. So that's all that I wanted to say. Laura, I will hand back to you and we can get to the real meat of the discussion with Volts from Kaluza and Jim from Grid Edge. So Laura, over to you.
Matt, thank you so much. And I love your vision about an integrated infrastructure system and not in the silos, and really bringing that together. And you've got a great, great vision. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Jim Scott, who's co-founder of Grid Edge, who actually is putting a lot of these ideas actually into practice. So Jim, thank you very much.
Good morning. Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Matt, as well. Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name's Jim Scott. As Laura said, I'm a CPO for Grid Edge, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our view of how we see data enabling our customers moving towards their net zero vision, and some of the projects and experiences that we've had along the way just here. So yeah, I like to think that we're a data science company. That's been mentioned a few times. It says on here a prop tech startup. We certainly didn't start it up to be a prop tech company. I think that might have been a phrase that appeared around 2019 and seems to be being applied to us by other people, which is fine by me. We've grown up to about 25 people now. We've managed to grow during the COVID lockdown of 2020, and we're looking to employ a few more people this year as well. So I never really imagined it being so big so fast, but it's been quite a roller coaster, especially when you realize how a bulk of our customers are commercial and industrial building owner operators. So they're things like shopping centers, local authorities, hotels, university campuses and airports and things. So obviously it's been a roller coaster of a 12 months for us. We provide a software as a service, a technology that we provide through the cloud, which helps our consumers, our energy consumers, I hope, address several different pain points that they have across their energy management needs. So the first is around efficiency, and we end up, I think, talking to them about flexibility and volatility of system and price, which you've heard about quite a bit already from the previous speakers. The vision of the company, really, the reason that we framed ourselves this way was we really noticed that consumers were being treated probably by the energy industry rather than regulators or anybody else, as this entity on the end of a wire, this thing that had this, maybe it's flexibility, maybe it's got money in it, right? It's the energy industry's only real contact with the real economy. So the shopping centres that we deal with, they sell jeans, they sell TVs and all the rest of it. That's money that comes into them. And they pay their electricity bills. And they weren't really at the heart of a lot of the thinking and the propositions that we were seeing, I suppose, especially when we were looking at flexibility, which I'll come on to in a minute. So as we started working to those, we really found this home in probably corporate European companies who were really talking about net zero in 2017 to 2018. And our view for that, remember, we're not a net zero company, right? We're an energy domain company. We can't talk about their supply chains or embedded emissions or food or any of the other things that they have in their much more wide and very ambitious net zero strategies. We talk to them about energy and increasingly only about electricity and less so about gas. But we see this as the journey that they are moving through. And we have customers that appear on all, some, or every single piece of this. So the first thing that we think that we can use data for is efficiency. When you see those slides and you hear those figures about how much data is knocking around, there's no more humans looking after energy than there were a few years ago. And they've only got 2 eyeballs each. So our product here helps them look at the right thing first. They don't have to go trawling through all of this data. It's often in very siloed and disparate data sets. It's difficult for them to access. Remember, they're not data scientists. They're often involved with sustainability, charity, CSR responsibilities, as well as reporting. And our product, I hope, helps them keep on top of their energy efficiency. So their first step is definitely this traditional idea. It's not so glamorous. It's not kind of as exciting. It's not investor fodder, but it's the most important thing for getting to net zero. Use less, don't waste it, use it when you need it, simple stuff. And the machine is really good at picking out when you're not doing that and helping you. And you've proactive responses that you can make rather than waiting for the bill to come through before you have to work out which light was left on all winter. We then see them start to move into what we've started calling dynamic cost avoidance. So here you've got quite a lot of our customers are putting in a lot of solar PV over a very long term. And for dynamic cost avoidance, I think it's quite a good gateway into flexibility. So for flexibility here, really, if you look at the profile on the bottom right, what we mean is optionality. Whereas previously you had no option to switch up or down or to increase or decrease your load. With the technologies, and that includes us, we think that that's the way that our consumer loads are going to go. Just quickly on flexibility, which I've said quite a few times so far, I think most people imagine a battery, or they imagine a diesel gen set, or they imagine maybe a frequency response market and some complicated things going on in Elexon world, and not really their problem. Right? But for Grid Edge, we think it's all in the built environment already, and the flexibility is different. It's not a battery, it's a building. But it's lower cost, it's ubiquitous, it doesn't have this capex, and it's under the control of people who understand that asset very clearly. It doesn't need to be sold in the same way. This is one of the differences that we've managed to tap into, I think. I've just got a few case studies here, just lastly, for where we found customers on this journey. So this is a neat one that we had for Kent. I heard interoperability being mentioned in Ellie's slide. So actually, that was the word that these guys used. But they were talking about making their solar work with their HVAC. They weren't looking outside of their estate. They weren't looking over the meter into the rest of the energy system. So yeah, with this council, we were working with them, and it's about spotting when miscontrol is going on. Nothing deliberate. It's just stuff being left in hand by the maintenance company. It's simple stuff, but it's very, very expensive. But also, yeah, tallying up when they're running the HVAC system with the PV system. So fairly simple on the face of it, but it still requires quite a good prediction of what the solar plant's going to do, who's coming into the building, when you're going to need to run the vent plan. Moving into kind of more into flexibility, one of the things that I found really interesting about this project that we did for a campus organization, we hear a lot about retail price volatility, right? The price is going to go up and down every half an hour, and you're going to be exposed to that if you accept that type of tariff. We also hear quite a bit about DNO constraints. that there are pinch points in the network, and sometimes these are forward containment, and you know what's coming, and you sign up or you don't. And sometimes these are kind of quite active. But they don't seem to talk to each other very much when I come and listen to the energy industry. But our customers see them on the same bill, their pass-through charges. So often they were speaking to us about what they can do in this type of situation. So we did this nice project here where we're looking at active network management, which is obviously it's data coming in from a third party. So LV metering company that we were working with here. And they were able to send us very real-time constraints on the amount of electricity that the site was able to use. And we could re-optimize the demand profile on the customer side using a couple of different assets. So in this kind of conceptual chart here, the purple line is assets that we can't control. So that's lighting and lifts and things. And the orange is stuff that we can control, and the yellow is solar, and the pink line is the total load. So the A&M, we can respond to that using a couple of different assets. These were the assets that we were controlling. So one of them is a V2G unit, which is quite a neat thing that we've been involved with for quite a while. And just lastly, Matt mentioned the PFA program. So this is a PFA-funded detailed design program down in Islington. Hi, Laura. And the keystone technology in this is ambient loop heat networks. And that means that we can electrify a lot of the heat technology in this area. And the cool thing about this project is we don't have to worry about electrical flexibility in the same way anymore. Our battery doesn't have to be an electrical battery. It's actually a tank of water and a heat loop and a schedule. So we're no longer bounded by where our geographic electricity demand is, because we can move the requirement for flexibility around the heat loop. And the heat loop touches on multiple different bits of the DNO's network that may or may not be constrained in quite the same way. So where you see Ofgem's view of this scaling up and out, this is probably our closest that we've managed to get. This is our furthest reach into that future. A lot of our customers are talking about their own estate only, their own shopping centre, their car park, their PV plant, and their vent plant. And this is our opportunity to think about multiple clusters all together. And certainly very grateful for Matt's and colleagues' work in releasing that funding. The project's called Green Skies, and it's got its own website, so you can go and find out a lot more about it over there if you're interested. Thank you very much for having me. Over to you, Laura.
So much, and I love that integration of other infrastructures and other assets beyond energy. We're a little bit too in our own little pocket of the sector. Gives me great pleasure to introduce Valts, who's Senior Flexibility Analyst at Kaluza. I think Kaluza's been really at the forefront of many of these data and digitalization driven new business models. So Valts, hand over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Valts Grindals, and as previously mentioned, I work as a Senior Flexibility Analyst at a company called Kaluza. And today I'll be talking about domestic flexibility, data, and some of the things that are needed to achieve net zero. So firstly, just to talk a bit about Kaluza. So Kaluza is an energy tech company offering fleet of different platforms to energy suppliers, device OEMs, network operators, and is focused on the domestic space. So it goes from billing platform to flexibility. And today I'll focus specifically on the flexibility platform and some of the learnings we've seen. But first, I just wanted to talk about the Net Zero Challenge. I think it's been mentioned in previous presentations in terms of the increasing the distribution and digitalization. And another thing to mention on this Net Zero can be seen here. So really what the chart shows here is the peak load and the available dispatchable generation today and in the future. So that's 2020 and 2050. And this really illustrates quite well the challenge, which is that the capacity margins will decrease, and actually, that's something that you've seen already in the past few weeks as imbalance prices have been high, and there's been multiple emergency notices from the grid. So as you can see here, if you include things like electrification of heat and transport on the grid, and you don't manage their charging, you don't have the right data infrastructure to facilitate all of that, there's a fundamental challenge of having enough dispatchable generation to meet the demand on the network. And what does it mean from the household perspective? Well, this means obviously there will be in the future increasing EV demand on the network in customers' homes, but it also presents an opportunity because it's a controllable load, and that same applies to heat and other devices. And what that means is that fundamentally the system needs to shift from modulating generation to meet demand to shifting demand that meets more intermittent, less predictable generation on the grid in shorter timeframes. And that is exactly what we do. So this is a picture that kind of explains the role that our flexibility platform plays. Fundamentally, it sits between devices in customers' homes, so we control range of battery storage assets in some of our customer homes, EV chargers, vehicle to grid and smart charging, smart heat, so storage heaters, heat pumps, all of that. We control those devices in customers' homes, optimize them for customer comfort, but also communicate with the other side of the network, which is wholesale markets, distribution networks, the ESO, also distributed generators and A&Ms in some locations, and just overall carbon intensity signals to really bring the cheapest possible solution to the customer and the greenest possible solution to the customer. And another thing that it illustrates very, very well is the fact that there's just a lot of data to capture on both sides. And obviously this applies on a household by household basis. So we capture on each home, we capture live data for each device on a minute by minute basis. And we can utilize that to respond to signals in the market. And as previously mentioned, I think the fundamental thing that is needed to facilitate all of this is obviously alignment across devices, markets, to really enable to get the most out of this. And what I mean by getting the most out of this, there's an example I can talk through, which is linked to EVs. So obviously we've been operating for 2 years now, and I've been optimizing and keeping data from thousands of EVs, both smart charging and also running the world's biggest vehicle to grid trial for domestic vehicle to grid. So kind of looking at that data and some of the future energy scenarios that have been presented by National Grid, you can see here, and this is a conservative scenario actually, that by 2030 there will be 6 million EVs on the road, which would mean 6 gigawatts of additional load at peak time. Obviously, if you don't apply any smart charging, when you assume half of the devices are capable of smart charging, obviously there's an opportunity to reduce this demand by 3 gigawatts. And obviously, if you have all devices smart charging, you have 6 gigawatts of load that you can fundamentally shift around to benefit the network and mitigate unnecessary network upgrades. But in addition to that, it also presents a significant balancing resource. So in this case, use 3 gigawatts, and those 3 gigawatts could, for example, help even in the past 2 weeks, right? In the scenarios where the prices spiked up to, I think, imbalance prices spiked up to £4,000 per megawatt hour. If devices like EVs in customer homes were able to participate in balancing mechanism, this would present a significant opportunity to the network and save millions of pounds. Here, we've actually done modeling and analysis of specifically the lockdown impact on system imbalance. And if you assume the same scenario as what happened in the lockdown in terms of system imbalances and use 3 gigawatts of EV flexibility, this could have saved 66 million pounds to the whole system in terms of its balancing costs. And just look at the time, quickly talk through one example of what we've done, which is the vehicle to grid project in the UK. So we've been optimizing 323 V2G devices in the UK in customers' homes to really learn more about the capabilities that device can bring to the network, and it's been great learning for us, and we're continually kind of capturing this data and learning more and more about what domestic flexibility and EVs can bring to the system. And last thing I wanted to touch on was very much linked to the fact that data plays a key role in, I think, unlocking flexibility at all scales. I think there's a commercial. When you look at the commercial scale flexibility, I think it's obviously more evolved with more accessibility to markets. But if you really want to manage a system as efficiently as possible at the lowest possible cost, you need to help domestic flexibility. And there are what we laid out are kind of 3 pillars of what is needed to facilitate this. And I've kind of added the data comments here. So firstly, in terms of smart metering, half-hourly settlement is just a fundamental thing that is needed to incentivize customers in their homes to participate in flexible markets and to help facilitate net zero, which is smart metering, half-hourly settlement, which helps which exposes customers to price signals that are reflective of what's happening on the network. Secondly, price signals for flexibility in terms of network charges. I think one of the challenges we've seen in network charges is the fact that there is a lack of granular network data down to low voltage network, which means that the network charges as they currently stand are relatively inefficient in terms of kind of giving the right incentives. So there's a clear need to get more data at higher temporal frequency down to specific locations to really enable this transition. And then last but not least, flexibility markets. Again, similar fundamental challenge is that there's a lack of data to really make these markets efficient and as valuable as possible. And there's also a lack of alignment between the devices, flexibility providers, and DNOs. And I think all of us just need to come together into standardizing all of this and aligning all of these factors. So yeah, that's everything from my side. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely wonderful. And what we got was a systems approach and then also a consumer approach. And I think both of these conflate extremely well as illustrative. So here we come to our panel and look forward to being joined by all the great speakers that we've had. We've had a lot of really great questions. And maybe if I take some of the themes that the questions have been asking us, and maybe you want to be more specific on them, but I think that there were, the first 3 themes was, and maybe this is a little bit to do with BEIS and Ofgem, which is the access to data for innovators and how we're really turbocharging that. And maybe illustrate a little bit more about people asking about openness and where are they going to be able to access and how is this going to manifest itself. A second theme is really looking at how we can learn from other sectors and other countries, and where are we in terms of that. I thought Matt's points about the integration of other sectors. I'm interested in the financial services sector as well as being a driver of markets, but I think we need to really start to get out of our energy box. And the third was also around, and very directed at Matt, but maybe other people have some views, is what are the exciting projects out there that are really can deliver us some export and some leadership. So maybe if I start with Dinka and we go around and pick up some of the themes, we've seen some of the questions, and Dinka, would you like to kick off?
Sure.
And comment on other presentations.
Sorry, am I audible? Yes? Cool. So So the first question around data openness and access for innovators. So I think the important point to make here is for the audience to familiarize themselves with the presumed open data concept. I think there is often this challenge around openness being somehow antagonistic to security and privacy. And I think that is important to demystify. And the way we have done that is through the presumed open data methodology and the open data triage process that the task force sort of recommended and has been taken forward in the data best practice guidance. So in a nutshell, what it does is it gives you a framework where you can become more and more confident with making more and more data available and open, while recognizing any legitimate concerns with consumer privacy or security. And we are dealing with critical national infrastructure here. So risk aversion is understood. And therefore, we have to be quite clear with what data we are making open and how soon. So that's the approach. Now, the avenues where innovators can get access, I think the energy data catalog work or the energy data visibility work, which BEIs are progressing, will be a fantastic source when ready for people to access data. And when I say when ready, I basically, I'm using some caution because the prototype we are expecting to be ready by the summer this year, so June, July time, hopefully. And I think the prototype will then accelerate future development, because then we'll be able to put something out there for innovators to test and then give us their feedback on what is working, what isn't working, and then we can develop that better. So I think that would be a key start. The other area which I think will be quite important is the work that Matt will describe in more detail around modernizing energy data access and modernizing energy data applications. I think both of those are digital platforms and tools which will increase the quality and quantity of energy data available to the marketplace. And let's not forget the work that the network companies are already doing. So Waltz talked about a lot of the data that is needed to enable flexibility markets and price signals. And a big barrier in that is higher granularity network data. And I am pleased to say that all network companies are now moving towards making that more and more available. Some are moving faster than the others, but all network companies are trying to do that. And I think in the next 6 to 12 months, all of that will improve. And Ofgem will, I'm sure, will do a good job of signposting all of that information through their assessment of the digitalization strategies and action plans. But Ellie can talk more about that. So I think, just to recap, presumed open data will give the framework to make more data open. The data catalog and the modernizing energy data innovation activity will give avenues for people to access it. And the digitalization strategies and action plans will give us measurable evidence of how networks are making more and more data available to the market. So I would stop there, but happy to clarify.
Fantastic. So we're looking forward to the summer. Elena, quite short because we haven't got huge.
Yes, of course. I wanted to touch on the question of lessons from other sectors, and particularly, Laura, you mentioned financial services, and I believe there was a question in the audience about what have we learned from the telecoms sector. And I have to say that the digitalization of both of those sectors has, I mean, we have looked at it. This is not, we're not operating in a vacuum. More importantly, it's always good to see what others have learned, especially in the telecom sector, which has happened already, 15 to 20 years ago. And I think the key lessons that we have taken out of the telecoms and the financial services is realizing what the customers are, their needs, their behaviors, analyzing them throughout the journey is very, very important, because they are the ultimate beneficiaries of all of the changes that are happening. And we do that at Ofgem as well. We have our own behavioral insights team who look at customer behavior. Just to give you an example, during COVID, we're monitoring vulnerable customers, price sensitivity, and providing assistance there. Moving on to digitalization, the other two lessons that sort of very high level lessons that we have learned is the automation of IT processes, automation, moving from manual processes to automated processes, automated decision making is absolutely crucial, and understanding where regulation is important in those important touch points so that the decision making is not discriminatory or not harmful in any way, shape or form. And I think the other lesson to bear in mind is those transformations were gradual. They were not the big bang approach, both from a sector perspective, but also from individual companies, is that the all-inclusive IT transformations were not the ones that brought the most benefits and stability to the market, but it was actually targeted driven projects that take into consideration both the user needs and also companies' capability. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Now, Matt, you had a couple of questions directed at you about what projects are the most exciting with export potential.
Yeah, so obviously I would say that they're all exciting and they've all got export potential, but I think given where we are, some of our demonstrator projects I think are more advanced than some of our detailed design projects at the moment. So the Reflex project up in Scotland, we know that, you know, they are having international discussions with you know, over a dozen different countries and regions about setting up smart energy islands in different locations, and they're building kind of real capability and expertise you know, for the UK, which can be sort of taken internationally, but also the Energy Super Hub Oxford and Local Energy Oxfordshire, you know, they're all in sort of national and international discussions about exportability. Our detailed designs projects have all got work packages associated with finance, investment, scalability. So that's a kind of critical part of the program is, you know, we really acknowledge that sometimes innovation, some of the failures of innovation are that we do projects and they write reports and they go on a shelf and no one looks at them. We're not going to do that anymore. You know, as an organization, we are ruthlessly focused on supporting these organizations to grow and scale nationally and internationally. And in the next 12 months, you will hear a lot more from us as a team in terms of how we're going to do that. So I think that was the points around sort of scale and exportability. I had a couple of questions around lessons from other countries and other sectors. So with the digitalization task force, you know, we're going to set up a series of different strategic advisors here across telecoms, logistics, change, you know, the internet sector, manufacturing, and we are being really open to the fact that we do not have all the answers, you know, without a doubt. Like if we go and talk to Amazon or BT about data, you know, the energy industry is not always seen as the shining light that some of us might want it to be. So we just got to be really open to that. And internationally, you know, we're hunting for an example of best practice. Where is the global best practice example of a digitized energy system? Is it Israel? Is it Singapore? You know, is it Denmark or the Scandinavian countries? You know, where is that place? And I think for those on the call, you know, industry leaders, like we need you to help us with that kind of challenge. You know, we need to listen to industry, and you guys are at the cutting edge. Tell us where you think we need to focus. And like Dinka said at the beginning, we are listening. I think one of the big differences with this Modernizing Energy Data team is that there's humility and gaps that we need to fill with industry. So we're all ears, just do come forward. I think they were the majority of my sort of questions, Laura, so I don't want to take up too much time, but happy to take any more on board if you wish.
I think you're very generous by saying that we're not at the forefront of data and digitalization, but it does offer us an opportunity to leapfrog, which is really important. So Jim, what would you say would be your big sort of leapfrog moment, and where do you think the biggest opportunities for projects to really unlock value?
So I think a big area that we don't see taking up some of this innovation is probably construction. And construction in the real estate industries generally, you know, they're funded by pension funds, they're very risk averse, and frankly, they don't pay the energy bill, and they probably make more money on the interest of doing the deal in Hong Kong time over to the US in currency exchange value than they do in you know, the total lifetime energy cost that they'll be exposed to as the landlord on some of those buildings. That means that they don't feel the pain of this net zero. There's quite a lot of quite elegant mechanisms that are being championed in both of those sectors, in construction and real estate, evolutions of CSR, I suppose, around governance, and I can't remember what they call it now, somebody will know better than me. We see them as a lot of talk up front in the planning stage, and a lot of cost cutting at construction phase, and that's an area we can't access with our solution. So I think if you get real commitment and long-termism, and I shouldn't be too rude about that sector, right? That's not across the board. You always have in construction some far-reaching best practice buildings, and then everything else looks kind of like a box stuck on the edge of a town somewhere, and they do struggle to map them across, I think, due to cost. So that, I think, if we could really access new builds, that would be it would change what's normal. It would change what's mainstream. And I think that would be quite a leapfrogging moment for what we expect from our built environment. The reality, of course, is most of the buildings that we deal with are the systems that we have to interface with were installed before Facebook was invented. So most of them were like before cyber crimes were being prosecuted in Europe properly. Like, so they're old, and they don't move with the times, and we kind of have to drag those systems in a little bit, and that kind of goes for sometimes our customers' IT departments as well. It's the first time they've realized they have this hidden network of building management systems in their estate. So I think probably just maturity of those two areas would it would remove the barriers for us.
Yeah, I think there's a very, very important point here about when you talk to some energy people about digitalization, they do point you to their IT manager, and it's a little bit different from that. But I think also there's the Centre for Digital Built Britain as well, which is trying to drive some of the agenda forward on construction and building standards. But I agree with you, we're still living in silos. So Kulz, when you look at the consumer side, you talked also about flexible markets, and I've always been interested in how the stock market moved from 300 people sitting in a room putting their hands up to buy and sell stock to a whole digitalization platform which has democratized stock market trading globally just in time, with a lot of security embedded in it. And I wonder whether you see any analogies with other sectors that we need to drive to actually open up those markets more effectively and more democratically, actually.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think, yeah, like what I mentioned before, which is the key challenge that we've been seeing recently. Obviously, I think there's this net zero end goal, and the vision is there, and everyone is aligned on that vision. There's a step in between, which is just fundamentally aligning on what data is needed, when, how it's being shared. I think there's also a question around data integration challenges as it comes from different sources. You know, there's a energy tech company which obviously is, you know, has the ability to be a bit more advanced on data and being able to share the data, capture the data. There's networks which obviously have their challenges. And it's really all about aligning on types of data and then being able to share the data. What we see as I guess as a good use case is just having APIs in place, which enables this automation of things as well. You know, there's good examples in the market that we've seen from working with, give an example with WPD on Interflex. You know, it's a project that you know, tests out different things in flexibility markets. One of those things is also having APIs across the whole process of you know, submitting onboarding assets, submitting bids, receiving calls to dispatch. All of that can be automated through APIs. The data is shared in a standardized format, and it's quite, you know, it's efficient. And if you have all of that in place, you can then democratize the market and get everyone involved in doing things in the energy market and getting value from it, from flexibility. And that's really the end goal, is that, you know, you buy a car, you buy a smart charger, you buy a heat pump, it is flex ready. You just need to, you know, download an app, press a button, and you're there, and you can monetize that flexibility in those devices and lower your cost.
Can I push on that? Because I'm very interested that we've got a lot of manufacturers of products, cars, white goods, and heat pumps, right? All of whom, some of whom don't have, I mean, heat pumps are not actually what I would call energy enabled. They're not necessarily connected. They've got very low standards in terms of system design. But some of the car companies have got what they might call captured data environments. And then some of the charging systems are captured rather than open. And if I'm going to then come around everybody and ask them, what would be your one thing that you would ask either Ofgem, BEIS, Innovate, all the sector to do to actually unlock this? And my question would be that we need to ensure that actually, if you connect to the energy system, you need to be energy enabled and energy interoperable. And I think these captured islands are going to become A, a problem, and B, create some consumer problems down the line. But Waltz, I'm going to start with you. What would be your one key unlocker of data and digitalization?
Yeah, I agree with interoperability point, definitely. I think another thing that I would add, and what we've seen with working quite a bit with OEMs, is and trying to get them involved in energy markets and flexibility, is that for domestic flexibility specifically, there is often a lack of clarity around what the device actually needs to be able to do to ensure that it's ready to participate in those markets. So first of all, OEMs are, it's not their priority to think about, oh, do I need to capture data on second by second basis? Is it minute by minute basis? Do I need to calibrate it for a certain power measurement accuracy? None of that is defined, well defined in energy markets. So one of the big challenges we're facing is that we cannot go to a OEM and device manufacturer and say, this is what your device needs to do. This is what the standards it needs to meet to be ready for 2025, fully flex market ready, and be able to, capture the value from those markets. And that's what seems to be missing from our perspective, purely from flex side of things.
Product standards. Jim, what would be your key ask, as you've got all these wonderful people sitting around this table?
So I think the way that we see that hardware piece changing is probably similar to what Waltz was saying, that I'd always imagined it a bit more like the way that you buy a mobile phone. You buy the hardware from Apple, and you buy the SIM card or the carrier from EE, and they go together nicely. The line that we get back from OEMs, let's pick Toshiba or Mitsubishi making heat pumps, is they build for a global market. They're not going to worry about little UK's particular nuance of their particular frequency market, which I think is what Waltz was getting at there, which is a great opportunity for companies in the UK to sort that out, right? To bolt on their interface and to bolt on their application. I've seen this happen quite a few times. I think smart meters were the panacea of it around 2012, and then there's been various other CDC and all these other little. We know it's the answer, and we have quite a lot on our side. All we're really trying to do is turn the thing off or on, maybe charge, discharge, and stop. So it's not wildly complex, right? As far as the ask and the unlock, I think an area I think's really exciting, and I know there's a lot of work going on this already. It's not from a dead start, but it's around what I think is called split metering. So I know the Elexon seem to be managing this. I think it's called P379. I think that's really exciting because you have this currently. If you take the domestic case where you've got an electric vehicle in your house and you're working from home, when you go out to buy a tariff, you have to compromise. You have to either, do I buy the nighttime tariff for my car, or do I buy the daytime thing, and do the savings wipe each other out? And that's bad for everybody. It's bad for people selling tariffs. It's bad for people buying tariffs. We see it in the commercial environment all the time. That's my ask, is accelerate that and do it properly.
Jim, I think that's absolutely key as well. And it gives consumers real choice then, and real optimization of their whole system. Matt, Elena, Dinka, what would you like to see somebody else do? Not yourself, but quite quickly, because we're sort of coming to the end of this. Matt.
Yeah, no worries. I'll whistle through really quickly. So I feel quite fundamentally that we really need a new market design for the UK. You know, we've got the balancing mechanism, we've got ancillary services, we've got the wholesale market, we've got DSO ancillary services, and we've got a zillion types of products, and we make it really difficult for businesses to actually access revenue and to enable distributed energy resources. So at some stage, we've got to wrestle that gorilla and just try and make it easier. So that would be
and
magic wand market design.
And I completely second Matt's point. Absolutely, the increased complexity is making it more difficult, both for all types of market participants to be to get the best value out of the energy sector. And another thing I want to reiterate, I'm not sure I made the point very strongly, but is we want to work as a regulator, we want to work with the market because we believe that is the right approach to ensuring that we have the most effective regulation. And we regulate in the instances where there are challenges to achieving that effectiveness, efficiency, and transformation. And where the market is functioning appropriately, we need to reevaluate and look into the future as to what the right level of regulation is required, if any. But we do need to listen from everybody here on this call, experts, market participants, innovators, consumers, and please do get in touch with us.
So I think that's a really interesting point about whether there are some rules, there are some standards, and there are some regulations. And the least amount of all of those, the better. But still, there will need to be sort of frameworks, right?
Yeah.
And each three is quite different.
Yeah.
Rules, regulations, and standards are different concepts. And I think it's going to be very interesting. And hopefully, through your great, Matt, your task force on digitalization, we'll be able to triage those different functions and understand where they sit in terms of responsibility. Now, Dinka, I also wanted to say to you, that we're losing you from BEIS to the Scottish Government, and we're going to miss you hugely. So I hope people don't mind me saying that in this conference. But so you have the last word, your leaving word to us all as you watch us go start this digitalization journey.
Fantastic. This is great. I mean, I can ask you guys to do stuff and have no responsibility whatsoever. This is brilliant. No, but I do want to say one thing. I feel in my 18 months in this role, I have seen massive consensus on a need to do something. I have not heard anyone say, let's not digitalize. So I think that's fine. I think I have seen massive consensus there, but I have seen absolutely no consensus on how do we make it happen. And I feel like we have tried to set some things in motion through the modernizing energy data work. I feel like we have managed to get some really good feedback, but I would still encourage everyone as a responsibility almost to engage with what's coming out. So I want people to look at open energy and give feedback on whether this is going to work or not, because if it is not going to work, let's not waste another dime on it. And I think that is really important. I want people to look at the digitalization strategies coming out of the networks and tell us whether they are going to work or not. Is this the granularity of data that will unlock flexibility or not? And if it is not going to solve the problems that you face, then we need to change the expectations on the networks. And equally, is 30 minutes enough? You know, when you talk about sub-metering, maybe you need 15 minutes, maybe you need 5 seconds, I don't know. And I think that is a really important question to grapple. And so I would really encourage everyone on this call, everyone who's sort of cares about this agenda, to engage with what is already out there. And I think there is a lot out there. If you are struggling to find where it is, in the next few months, we will publish an energy data and digitalization strategy, which will give you a lot of information to engage with it. But once you have that information, I would really encourage everyone to make use of it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Dinka, I hope very much that we move away from this very old-fashioned half-hour mentality. The stock market moves just in milliseconds. There's absolutely no reason why this shouldn't be at a totally different level. So I'm going to take that personally from you as a sort of mantra. I want to say a massive thank you to all 5 of you for really illustrating from policy, regulation, innovation, but then through into reality, which is absolutely crucial, of our last 2 speakers, Valtz and Jim. And I think that we're on this journey. It's a very exciting journey, but I think one of the key things that's come out of the questions is we've got to learn from others, from other sectors, and we've got to conflate our solutions, as Jim rightly points out, with how other sectors are digitalizing. So I hope that as a sort of new sect of data and digitalization, we'll be moving forward. I would also say, and I think it's a great reflection on how quickly the sector has moved on. We have moved on. I don't think 4 or 5 years ago there would have been a panel on data and digitalization. So we're on the journey, and thank you particularly to All Energy for this great forum and this great opportunity to highlight what's happening today and what will happen in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.